I don't have many memories from my childhood with my mother and father together. What I heard growing up from relatives was that they never really had a peaceful relationship. Things between them were difficult. Before she met my father, my mother already had an older son while she was living and working in São Paulo. Later, she met my dad and they had me and my brother. Their relationship didn't last, and after that she got married again and had another son. One of the strongest things I remember is that not long after my youngest brother was born, my mother passed away. I have very few memories of her. I remember her funeral being held inside my grandfather's house in the countryside, which was common back then. I was just a child, and I didn't really understand what was happening. Looking back now, I think that was the beginning of a very difficult period in my life. Because my older brothers weren't my father's children, my paternal grandfather later told me that while my mother was sick, she had asked him to come get me and my brother and take us to São Paulo. So after she died, that's exactly what happened. My brother and I moved to São Paulo, and little by little I became separated from my other two brothers. I was just a child. I had no understanding of what was happening around me. I didn't even understand that my mother had died. All I knew was that I had left the place that felt like home, where I lived with my brothers in the countryside, and suddenly I was somewhere else, surrounded by different people. Those people were my paternal grandparents. My father lived with them, but it was really my grandparents who raised me. They're my father's parents, and I grew up in their home. What I remember most is that after the funeral, I came to São Paulo, and for a very long time, I never saw my brothers again. Even today, that part of my life is painful. I used to wonder why nobody had explained anything to me. Maybe someone did, and I simply don't remember, but inside me there was always this emptiness. For years, I couldn't understand what had happened to my mother. In my mind, she hadn't died. She had simply disappeared. There I was, living in another house with other people, without my mother and without my brothers. I think the separation from my oldest brother affected me deeply, and I feel like it affected him even more. We've never really sat down and talked about it, but I can tell that it still hurts him. Today we keep in touch. We have each other's WhatsApp numbers and talk from time to time, but I still feel that pain inside him. For me, the loss of my mother became this huge empty space that stayed with me for many years. My father's family always spoke highly of her. They would say she was hardworking, dedicated, and a good woman. Those are the words I remember hearing. My father hardly ever talked about her. I don't know why. He worked all the time, and sometimes he would have relationships and live with other women. But I always stayed with my grandfather, his father. I have so much love for my grandparents. They raised me, and I know they did the best they could with what they had. My mother had died, so naturally I had to stay with my father's side of the family. She died from breast cancer. There's one memory that has stayed with me all these years, though sometimes I wonder if it's something my mind created. I've even talked about it in therapy. I remember us riding in what I think was a small truck on our way to a farm. I believe it was during the final stage of my mother's illness. I remember arriving there and seeing her lying down while we stayed close to her. And somehow, in my memory, that was the last time I ever saw her alive. To this day, I don't know for sure. No one ever told me exactly what happened after that day. Nobody said, "She passed away the next day," or explained the sequence of events. So sometimes I wonder if it's a real memory or something I imagined, but I can see it so clearly in my mind. All of us were there with her at that farm. After that, the next time we saw her was at my maternal grandfather's house, where she was being mourned. Back then, funerals were often held inside people's homes. My family says that while all of this was happening, I was running around the house like any little kid, without understanding anything. And that's true. I only started realizing something was wrong after I was already in São Paulo, surrounded by strangers, without my mother, and, most painfully, without my brothers. My oldest brother stayed with our maternal grandfather. My youngest brother, who was still practically a baby, stayed with his father, who also lived in the countryside. Today, both of them are hardworking, honest, respectful men, and seeing the lives they've built makes me genuinely happy. It was a difficult time for all of us, I know that, but somehow, I've always felt that I had a different kind of strength. Maybe that's what helped me keep moving forward. I don't think men express their feelings the same way women do, but for many years I found myself thinking about my oldest brother. I would tell myself, If this has been hard for me, imagine what it was like for him. He lost our mother, and then suddenly his siblings were gone. On top of that, he never knew his father either. My mother never talked about him. He has an incredible godmother. From what I know, my mother worked for her when she lived in São Paulo, and she became his godmother. To this day, she looks after him and stays in touch with him. She's truly a wonderful person, someone with a genuinely kind heart. Even now, though, I still feel a distance between my brother and me. We talk, I text him good morning, I try to start conversations, but I can tell he keeps part of himself closed off. Deep down, I have this dream of bringing all of us together someday and sharing more of our lives with each other, especially now that I have 2 daughters. My oldest brother has a daughter too, and my younger brother on my father's side also has a little girl. My youngest brother, the baby of the family, doesn't have children and isn't in a relationship right now, but I hope that changes someday. I think being closer as a family would mean a lot to all of us. It's something I still hope to make happen. What hurt me most back then was that I never realized I was saying goodbye. I had no idea that the last time we were all together would truly be the last time. Nobody told me. I didn't know I was leaving my brothers behind, so that entire period became this huge emptiness in my life. As the years passed and I became a teenager, my paternal grandfather decided he wanted to move back to the countryside. He went to live on a farm, and I stayed in São Paulo with one of my aunts. I lived with her for a while, and eventually, when I was 16 or 17, I started working. Life became exhausting. Between work and everything else, there were also some family conflicts inside my aunt's home. I understood that it was her house, and there came a point when I had to leave. Once again, I found myself starting over. I was still very young when I moved out on my own. Almost all of my paycheck went toward rent and basic expenses, but I managed. Around that same time, I had a little crush on the man who would later become the father of my first daughter. We actually met at my father's house. By then, he was already living with my stepmother and had his own family. One day there was a party, and some of my stepmother's nieces invited their friends over. That's where I first met him. Back then, I only visited my father's house occasionally, so our paths crossed almost by chance. I liked him right away, but I was much younger than he was, and honestly didn't have the maturity for a serious relationship. At that time, he didn't seem interested either. Later, after I had started working and was preparing to live on my own, things changed. He worked nights on a 6 days on, 1 day off schedule, so on some of his days off, he would stay over at my apartment. Since I lived alone, he started spending more and more time there. He helped me a lot. He bought things for the apartment, supported me, and knew how hard things were because I had nobody else. Little by little, we started living together. Eventually, we made our union official, and when I was 19, almost 20 years old, I became pregnant with my daughter, Lorena. Today, Lorena is 12 years old. At first, our relationship was good. When we moved in together, I felt like that was exactly what he wanted too. But after a while, I started noticing some behaviors that worried me. There were always friends hanging around the house, constant parties, a lot of drinking, and people interfering in our relationship. His friends were always inviting him out, and little by little, problems started appearing. I let things continue for a while, but eventually we separated. Not long after that, he passed away. Lorena was still very little. That's when the chapter with my second husband began. It happened fairly quickly. I had been alone for about 1.5 years, maybe almost 2 years. One day, without any expectations, I stopped by a friend's workplace and invited her to lunch. When I got there, I saw him. My second husband worked there. After that first meeting, my friend told me, "Wow, he really liked you. He wanted to talk to you." I immediately said, "No, that's not what I'm looking for." But I used to stop by her workplace almost every day, and eventually he reached out to me on Instagram and asked if I'd like to grab a coffee. After my friend kept saying, "Just give him a chance. Talk to him," I finally agreed. Honestly, he wasn't really my type. I didn't look at him and think, that's the kind of man I'd go for. But since I kept seeing him and he continued messaging me, he slowly sparked my interest. I thought, why not? It's just coffee. So I went. It was a short meeting, nothing special. We talked for a bit, he went back to work, and I headed home. Later, he invited me to lunch, and we started having these simple moments together. Lunch, coffee, casual conversations. At first, I actually thought it was strange. I remember thinking, he doesn't seem interested in me. There wasn't any flirting or obvious signs, just those invitations. Things only started changing when one day, after work, we went out to grab something to eat. When it came time to order, he asked for a Coke. I remember noticing that immediately. My first husband had gone through a difficult period with alcohol, and I knew how painful that had been. So when I saw him order a soda, I thought, I like that. At least he doesn't seem to be into drinking. I'll pay attention to that. We sat there talking, eating, and while he drank his Coke, I had ordered a cocktail. That night, we kissed, and after that, we were inseparable. Eventually, I felt ready to let him meet my daughter. He already knew I had a child, and at first I introduced him as a friend because our relationship was still new. Lorena was a little over 2 years old then, just a baby, and she absolutely adored this friend of Mommy's. He was respectful, polite, funny, and sweet with her. We went out together several times because I wanted to observe everything. She was so young, and I needed to know how he treated her and what kind of person he really was. Little by little, he became more involved in our lives. He spent more time at my house, and Lorena loved every second of it. She's such a loving girl, very family-oriented and affectionate. If he didn't come around, she'd ask about him. That was when I realized she had become attached to him too. Then one day he said, "I want you to meet my parents." I remember getting nervous. I kept wondering, how are they going to receive me? I live on my own, I have a daughter, I already have my life. He's young and doesn't have any children. What does he even want with a woman who already has a child? I truly had no idea how his family would react. We went to a restaurant where his father worked, and from the moment I arrived, I felt welcomed. I felt comfortable right away, and what touched me the most was how they treated Lorena. They immediately embraced her. "Come here, Grandma's girl," they would say. To this day, she calls them Grandpa and Grandma. They accepted her with so much love, and they became incredibly important in her life. Since she had lost her father so young, she didn't really have a father figure. She loves her biological paternal grandparents, and they're wonderful with her. She spends weekends and vacations with them because they live nearby, and they're very present in her life. But with my second husband's parents, she gained another family. Even today, although he and I are no longer together, his parents still say, "Bring her over. It's been too long since we've seen her." They send voice messages and tell her to come visit Grandma. Their love for her never changed. Seeing how warmly they embraced my daughter made me fall in love with the whole family. He had sisters, lots of sisters, and it was a huge family. I loved the noise, the laughter, the chaos. We spent almost every weekend there because I genuinely enjoyed being surrounded by everyone. To this day, I still care deeply about them, including his sisters. As time passed, we moved in together. He proposed, and we even looked into wedding prices and started planning everything. But life happened. So many personal things were going on that little by little, the wedding plans got pushed aside. Around that time, he had started a new career. When we met, he worked as a store manager in retail, but later he switched to a completely different field. He began working in the consortium business, which was the profession he was still in when we eventually separated. It was a totally new chapter for him, and our lives were changing right along with it. Around that time, he moved to a different company, and there was a lot going on in our lives. We were trying to manage so many things at once. Right when we had started talking seriously about getting married and had even visited some venues to compare prices, I found out I was pregnant with my second daughter. Because of that, we put our wedding plans on hold. Not long after our second daughter was born, he went through that career change. Even though he was still working in sales, it was a completely different field, and I remember how anxious he was. He had always been a hardworking man. He wanted to provide, wanted to do well financially, and he took his work seriously. I can honestly say I never had anything negative to say about him when it came to work. He was incredibly dedicated and always honest. As a husband, he was just as remarkable. He was respectful, thoughtful, and gentle. He would tie the laces on my sneakers, notice if my clothes were wrinkled before I went out, and make sure I was okay. He was caring with me and with my oldest daughter. He was calm, truly one of the calmest people I've ever known. Meanwhile, I was always the opposite, more restless and outspoken. He was quieter, more reserved, and very peaceful. Sometimes I would ask myself if relationships like ours even existed. We rarely argued. There were no lies, no games, no secrets. If one of us had a password on our phone, the other knew it. There was never anything to hide. Trust wasn't an issue between us. I never had any complaints about the way he treated me, the way he handled things at home, or the love and care he showed my oldest daughter. Then came my second pregnancy. It was unexpected, and I remember thinking, there are already so many things happening. I didn't plan to be pregnant right now. But he was overjoyed. He would say, "Relax, everything's going to be okay. I'm going to be a dad." He was so happy, and during my pregnancy, he took incredible care of me. If he could have kept me sitting on the couch all day doing nothing, he would have. He tried to make sure I didn't overexert myself and did everything he could to help with my oldest daughter. He was there when our daughter was born, and that whole experience was beautiful. Once she arrived, he woke up with me during the night. Even though he couldn't breastfeed, he stayed right beside me. While I nursed, he changed diapers. If the baby cried, he would jump up immediately, worried she might be hungry. He wanted to be involved in everything. By then, he had already started in his new profession. But even after working all day, he came home and gave us his full attention. The care he had for the girls was unbelievable. Everyone around us noticed it. My family, our friends, everyone. They all saw how loving and involved he was with me and the children. It didn't matter that I stayed home and he worked outside the house. What mattered to him was coming home and spending quality time with us. He wasn't the kind of person who sat on the couch and checked out. He was always present, always helping, always participating. At the time, I was blonde, and after a few months, I wanted to get my hair done again. Anyone who's been to a salon knows how long those appointments can take. I remember spending hours there, and he would send me pictures saying, "I already made the rice. The beans are done." He'd send photos of the girls and text me, "Don't worry, take your time, leave whenever you're ready." I had a true partner beside me. Not once did I hear him complain or say, "You're still not home?" or "Hurry up already." Never. I admired him so much because he brought me peace. I had always been the anxious one, and he gave me security, calm, and stability. I think that's one of the most valuable things in a relationship, being with someone who gives you peace instead of making you constantly wonder where they are or whether they're telling the truth. I never had those fears with him. If he said he was going to work, he went to work. And if he had the chance to come home early, he would, simply because he wanted to spend more time with us. Another thing that everyone noticed, and that I loved, was that he never liked doing things separately. There was no, "You girls go ahead and eat," or "I'll meet you later." It was always, "Let's all go together." He wouldn't go without me, and I wouldn't go without him. We did everything as a family. When I became pregnant with Bella, I remember thinking that maybe I would have liked more time for just the two of us. I wanted to enjoy our relationship a little longer and be completely sure before having another baby. But when Bella was born, she brought us even closer. In so many ways, our family became even stronger. And seeing the bond between her and Lorena later on made me realize just how much love had grown between all of us. At the time, I worried a lot about becoming pregnant so soon, but looking back now, I realize how important Bella's arrival was, especially for Lorena. After losing her father, she always talked about wanting a sibling. My fears had nothing to do with not wanting another child. I was simply scared that I wouldn't be able to handle everything, or that maybe the relationship wouldn't work out. But it did. Bella's birth was something beautiful for Lorena. She was always affectionate with her little sister and wanted to be involved in everything. If we were giving the baby a bath, she was right there beside us. She participated as much as she could. Even her paternal family was involved and excited. Since I don't have my mother, something that touched me deeply happened a couple of days before Bella was born. If I remember correctly, my first daughter's paternal grandmother and aunt came over to my house. I was already around 36 weeks pregnant, and they said, "Come on, let's get things ready. This baby is almost here." They helped me wash the baby clothes, and after everything dried, they sat with me and ironed all those tiny outfits. It meant so much to me. That support came from my first daughter's father's family, and I never forgot that kindness. When Bella finally arrived, everything felt joyful. We were entering a new stage. Professionally, my husband was also beginning a new chapter, with opportunities to earn more money. Growing financially and helping him grow professionally meant a lot to us. Bila was only a few months old. Everything was new, but somehow we managed it all very well. As soon as he joined that company, he threw himself into his work. He was incredibly focused. When he wanted something, he went after it. He always stood out. He was one of the top salespeople, always among the highest performers in the company. Financially, our lives improved too. So many good things were happening in such a short time that I sometimes couldn't believe it. I would think, I can't believe this is my life. I was in a healthy relationship. My daughter had a father figure who genuinely loved her. It wasn't something forced or something I desperately searched for. I wasn't looking for someone just to fill that role. Everything had happened naturally. Honestly, I felt like I was living the happiest season of my life. I had my baby girl. I got along well with my first daughter's paternal family, and I also had a wonderful relationship with my husband's family. It felt like everything was falling into place. As the years went by, he kept growing professionally. Then, in 2022, he was promoted from salesman to supervisor, which meant he would be leading a sales team. At that time, I didn't have a full-time job. I loved working with makeup and would schedule clients mostly on weekends. For a while, I also worked with eyelash extensions and even had a small commercial space. Coincidentally, my studio was practically across the street from where he worked. We lived nearby, on Avenida Goiás, and everything in our lives was close together. Our apartment building, my workspace, and his office were all right there. We just crossed the street. The girls' schools were nearby too. One was on one side and the other just behind us. Everything seemed perfect. I would look around and think, this is exactly the life I wanted. What later became my nightmare actually started as something that should have been a reason to celebrate. Financially, we were doing well, and his promotion to supervisor meant he would earn even more. I remember him sitting down with me and saying, I'm going to be managing a team now, and I need your help. I need you to focus more on the girls and on the house. The truth is, I never had much of a support system. I lost my mother when I was little. Throughout our marriage, my support system had always been the two of us. If I had a doctor's appointment, he stayed with the girls. If I needed something, he was there. I never called an aunt or a sibling asking someone to watch the kids for an hour. I never had that habit. My support system was him. He knew my whole story. He knew about my childhood, the losses I had experienced, and all those empty spaces inside me. More than my husband, he was my best friend. I could tell him absolutely anything. There were no secrets between us. If something bothered me or someone hurt me, I would tell him. And his response was always the same. Okay, let's figure it out. That was who he was. His first instinct was always to solve things. I was always the emotional one. If someone hurt me, I would hold on to it and stay upset. He was different. His attitude was always, we need to fix this. That's why he wasn't just my husband. He was an amazing father, and above all, he was my best friend. Looking back now, one of the hardest things about everything that happened later was realizing that I lost my best friend. He was the one person I could tell absolutely anything. So when what should have been a happy moment came, I embraced it wholeheartedly. He sat down with me and said, I know you love your clients and working on weekends. I know how important it is to you. Most of my appointments happened on weekends, and he stayed home with the girls. That was one of the reasons I chose that profession in the first place. I knew I could work while he was with the kids, and I felt at peace because I knew they were in good hands. We didn't have family we could call and say, can you watch the kids for a while? Our daughters never stayed with relatives so that we could travel alone. We genuinely enjoyed being with them. When we traveled, we wanted them with us, seeing what we saw, eating what we ate, experiencing everything together. We loved that as a couple. He never complained or said, traveling with the kids is too much. Let's just go by ourselves. No, we loved seeing their excitement and happiness. We were each other's support system. If I needed something, he was there. If he needed something, I was there. That was our marriage. Then he told me, I'm going to be leading a sales team, and I need you to focus more on the house. Up until then, if there was a problem at school, he would pick the girls up. If I had clients, he adjusted his schedule. But with this new position, he knew he wouldn't be able to do that anymore. And honestly, I was happy for him. Seeing him grow professionally meant a lot to me. It would improve our finances and open new doors for our family. So I made a decision. I closed my studio. I really wanted to keep it. I dreamed about expanding it, bringing in other professionals, building something bigger in the beauty industry, and managing my own space. Even until recently, I still thought about that dream. But back then, I knew it would take years to build, and I also knew that I needed his support to make it happen someday. At that moment, though, he needed mine. So I agreed. I focused completely on our home and our daughters. I handled everything: groceries, school drop-offs, school pickups, appointments, the entire routine. His routine became much simpler. He would get up, get dressed, and go to work. Since everything was close by, he would cross the street and come home for lunch. He'd ask if I needed anything. Sometimes, if I didn't have clients during lunch hours, he would even take the girls to school. For a few months, everything worked well. Then, not long after he became a supervisor, I don't remember exactly when, he came home excited and said, "I'm throwing a party." I think it was after his team's first successful month. I thought it was great. He rented a house in São Caetano with a pool and everything. He told me, "Come by later." I already knew many people at the company because I had attended company events with him over the years. Since everything was close to downtown, sometimes I'd stop by just to say hello. The older employees especially knew me well because they'd seen me at previous parties. And once again, he showed me why I trusted him so much. Whenever there was a company celebration, he would always prepare me beforehand. "There'll be a big employees-only party," he'd say. "I'm receiving an award, but as soon as I can, I'll come home." And I trusted him completely. I never had problems with jealousy or mistrust. I never had to tell him, "Come home early." He always came home on his own. I never tried to stop him from going to company parties. And there were plenty of women there, beautiful women too. But throughout our relationship, he had always shown me through his actions that I had nothing to worry about. That was the man I knew. He would always tell me, "I'm going to enjoy the party a little, receive my award, and then I'll come home as soon as I can." And I never had to call him arguing or demanding that he come back. At least during those first years at the company, that wasn't our dynamic. Then he became a supervisor, and during his first month leading the team, he decided to throw a party. He had some trophies made and wanted to celebrate everyone's results. He rented a house with a pool in São Caetano and told me, "Bring the girls and come by later." I think he had originally asked me to come earlier, but the girls were still in school. I told him I'd wait until they got home and then we'd go. Later that afternoon, I called him and he didn't answer. I even joked, "I guess you don't want me there anymore. You didn't invite me again, so maybe it's already ending." He immediately said, "No, I'll come get you. I want you there." So I picked up the girls from school a little early and went with him. When I arrived, his team was there. I already knew some of the people because the team was new, but there were others I had never met before. Everyone greeted me warmly. The men said hello, the women were friendly, and everything seemed normal. I think this was around August of 2022. I've always been a friendly person, and I never had any issues with the women at his company. But there was one woman in particular. When I introduced myself to her, she looked at me in a way I can't really explain. Thank God I mentioned it to 2 people at the time because more than a year later I would realize that what I felt that day was real. I shook her hand, but something about the way she looked at me made me uncomfortable. I've always been very intuitive. Even though I wasn't close to God back then, I felt uneasy around her. I couldn't even look her in the eyes, and that's unusual for me. It bothered me because I felt something different coming from her. I couldn't explain it. I just felt like I wasn't welcome in her eyes. Everyone else was talking with me, laughing, making me feel included. But she stayed distant. She went off to play pool with some of the guys and barely said another word to me. We had only exchanged greetings, but that look stayed with me. Almost a year later, I would finally understand why. When we got home that night, I brought it up to him. He was my best friend, after all. I asked, "Who is she?" And right away, he answered, "Oh, she's married." I remember thinking, that's not what I asked. I only asked who she was and what team she came from. I didn't ask whether she was married. That answer made me uncomfortable, though I didn't understand why. I hated feeling that way because I didn't even know her. I'm not the kind of person who judges others right away. I prefer getting to know people before forming opinions. Still, I spent the whole week thinking about it. I even wondered if I was just spending too much time at home. I talked to a friend and she asked, could it be jealousy? Jealousy? After all these years? His aunt, who eventually became one of my closest friends and is Bella's godmother, was someone I trusted deeply. His family truly became a gift in my life. During that same week, I talked to her. I said, "I don't know how to explain it, but there was something strange about that woman." "What do you mean?" she asked. "I don't know. I just have a weird feeling." That was all. I told her there was something about that woman on his team that I couldn't explain. I even said, maybe she just didn't like me. Later during dinner, I mentioned it to him too. "I noticed she stayed away from me during the party," I said. "While I was talking with the other women, she kept her distance." He answered casually, "Oh, she's quiet. She doesn't really talk to anyone." His youngest sister had worked at the company for a couple of months, so because I had never been an insecure person, everyone kind of laughed about it. "Look at you getting jealous after all these years," they teased. I even spoke to his sister and explained what I had felt. She told me, "She's very quiet. I hardly ever saw her talking to anyone at work. She keeps to herself." So I thought there was nothing there. There wasn't any information that suggested otherwise. His sister only stayed at the company for a short time before leaving, and looking back now, I believe that whatever started between them happened after his sister was no longer working there. His sister told me, "I've never seen anything between them. Never. And honestly, everyone at the company always told me how much he talked about me. He had even surprised me with a car I had dreamed of, and he proudly told people about it during meetings. I bought my wife the car she wanted," he would say. "He admired me and I admired him. It was mutual. We were partners and best friends. Of course, we had disagreements from time to time, little family arguments like any couple, but nothing that ever threatened what we had. There was never disrespect. Never. I can't tell you that I spent years checking his phone or living with suspicions. That wasn't our story. None of that existed. It was only after he became a supervisor and took over that team that something inside me started to change. I remember his aunt telling me, 'That woman isn't even his type. Are you kidding? He's crazy about you.' And honestly, anyone who knew us would have said the same thing. If someone had suggested otherwise, people would have thought they were out of their minds. He really did seem more in love with me than I was with him, although I was just naturally more rational. Not long after that, we took a trip to Campos do Jordão. We were doing well financially because of his success at work, and I had always dreamed of staying in one of those cabins. I told him, "I know it's expensive, the price is high, and it doesn't even include meals. We'd still have to go downtown to eat." He just smiled and said, "Book it today. We can do it." So I did. It was one of those treehouse cabins inside a park. There were campfires, beautiful scenery, and it was such a cozy family atmosphere. It was truly an amazing experience, and I'd gladly go back someday. This time, though, we only took our younger daughter. I really wanted Lorena to come too, but she already had plans with her paternal grandparents and wanted to visit an aunt in the countryside, someone she might not get another chance to see. I remember leaving for the trip feeling sad. "I wish she were here," I told him. "She would love this. It's literally a treehouse." I was enchanted by the place. During the trip, he brought his laptop and worked. That had never bothered me because his job was what provided for us. I never had an issue with being at a cafe with my husband while he stepped into a meeting or answered work calls. I understood. At one point, he was focused on the computer and left his phone nearby. A notification popped up. It was her. It said that she had liked his story. I immediately thought it was strange. He had posted several stories from the trip, and she had reacted to all of them. I noticed little heart emojis. That was sometime around September or October of 2022. Something about it bothered me. Many of the women and men from his team followed me too. They liked my posts. One of the girls had even given me little princess-themed bowls because he had told everyone how much I enjoyed decorating the table for meals. But this woman was different. She didn't talk to me. She didn't follow me. Not that there was any rule saying she had to. Maybe we simply hadn't connected. Still, I thought it was odd. I checked the other reactions from his coworkers. Everyone had viewed the stories, but no one else was sending hearts. I paid attention. He had posted pictures of the cabin, a glass of wine, pizza, and later one with Bella. That was the picture she reacted to. And then I did something that probably sounds silly now. I took a selfie. In that moment, I thought, post it. I want to see if she reacts to yours. Maybe it wasn't the most mature thing to do, but I wanted to understand what I was feeling. She saw my story, and she didn't react. When we came back from that trip, I was much more alert. I started noticing everything. That same week, I was about to begin therapy. I had gained some weight, and it was affecting me emotionally. I also had a surgery I dreamed of having someday, and I wanted to prepare myself for that. Even though I genuinely loved being at home, taking care of my girls and taking care of him, I had started feeling something I couldn't quite explain. I felt useless. And that feeling had been quietly growing inside me. After that trip, I kept asking myself why I felt so disconnected. Whenever people asked me what I did for a living and I answered, I'm a stay-at-home mom, it bothered me more than I like to admit. I was still young, and although I loved taking care of my family, I started feeling useless inside. Not long after we got back from that cabin, I stopped wanting intimacy with my husband. I thought it had to be something psychological. I had gained some weight. I was focused on preparing for a surgery I had always wanted, and those strange feelings I had about that woman from his work still hadn't gone away. I even went to my gynecologist and said, I need to do some tests because I need something to help me want my husband again. I had no desire anymore. I would wait for him to fall asleep so I could lie down afterward and avoid being touched. That's where I was emotionally. One of my friends suggested therapy, and I decided to give it a try. I started going every Saturday. As I always say, he was my support system. Even though I took care of the house during the week, Saturdays were my day. I would wake up early, go to the salon, get my hair done, do my nails, and afterward he would pick me up and we would usually have lunch together. Once I started therapy, I kept that routine. I'd take care of everything I needed to do and then go to my appointment downtown. Afterward, he would pick me up and we'd go eat together. During those sessions, I talked about that strange feeling I had around that woman, and later I mentioned how she kept reacting to his stories. My therapist would ask me, have you talked to him about it? As the months went by, I kept bringing up little things I had been noticing. I think my therapist could tell I was overwhelmed with everything at home. Around that same time, his behavior had started changing too, and honestly, that was one of the hardest parts for me. He wasn't the same affectionate father anymore. He was more stressed, more impatient. I kept making excuses for him. It's work, I told myself. Maybe he didn't hit his goals. But his attitude toward me had changed too. He had become short-tempered and sometimes downright rude. Meanwhile, the company parties became more frequent. There was a new manager, and I had never really worried about those events before, whether they were inside or outside the company. I had attended some myself. My husband and I were so close that we told each other everything. He would come home and say things like, the manager got involved with so-and-so, or someone's boyfriend showed up at the office today and caused a scene, or a husband came looking for his wife because she was seeing someone else. That was the level of friendship we had. I used to look at that company and think, honestly, your workplace is a complete mess. Some of the stories were so absurd that I'm embarrassed to even repeat them. And when that new manager arrived, things became even crazier. It was party after party, alcohol everywhere, constant drama. Relationships were falling apart all the time. There was even a saying people repeated there. You either have a family or you work here. If you come in with a family, you leave without one. I always thought that was a terrible thing to say, but I trusted my husband. I had gone to company events before. People always spoke highly of him. Even years later, after our divorce, women who had worked with him long before that new team kept saying, I can't believe it. Nobody can believe it. It was a period full of changes. Financially, we were doing better than ever, but that was also when our nightmare quietly began. The changes I noticed in him were mostly in the little things. He stopped suggesting family outings. No more. Let's go out for lunch, or let's take the girls somewhere. Those moments slowly disappeared. One thing I had always loved about him was that no matter how exhausting his day had been, and even though I spent the day taking care of everything at home, after dinner, he would always offer to wash the dishes so I could rest. But I usually told him, no, I'd rather you put the girls to bed. They had spent all day without their dad because he was working, and bedtime was their special time with him. Our routine was always the same. We would sit together around the dinner table, the same table I still have, and I would always wait for him before serving dinner. Sometimes he'd call and say, "I'm still with a client." And I'd answer, "We'll wait for you. We'll snack on something, but we'll wait." That time together mattered to us. We'd set the table, eat as a family, and while I cleaned up afterward, he would take the girls to bed. Many nights he was so exhausted that he would end up falling asleep beside them, and I would be the one going to get him and saying it was time to come back to our room. I started noticing changes in his behavior little by little. He had never been a drinker. Alcohol simply wasn't part of his routine. But after the new management came in, there seemed to be a party for every little achievement. Every sale became an excuse to celebrate. At first I understood. He was a supervisor now, and I knew he couldn't skip company events. I was supportive. But then things began to shift in ways that bothered me. He started staying out later. He stopped checking in. The man who used to text me, "I'm here, I'll eat something, stay for a bit, and then come home," no longer seemed concerned about keeping me informed. I remember one Friday in particular. He said, "I'm going to the company party, but I won't stay long." I said, "That's fine. Just let me know, okay?" The time he told me he'd be home came and went. No message. Nothing. When he finally walked in, it was much later than expected, and I could smell alcohol on him. I looked at him and thought, is this going to become normal? Am I supposed to accept this? In therapy, I kept saying the same thing. I can't live like this. There were more company parties and more nights when he came home drunk and much later than he said he would. But one night, near the end of 2022, stood out. He told me, "I need the car. I'm going to São Paulo with one of the sales guys to meet a client." I said, "Okay, I'll manage. I'll pick up the girls and take care of everything." He left, and I expected him back later that evening. 8 o'clock came, then 9, 10, 11, midnight. Nothing. Not even a phone call. What hurt me most wasn't that he was late, it was that he wasn't acting like the man I knew. Before, if something unexpected happened, he would call and say, "We got delayed with the client." That was who he used to be. I went to bed feeling awful. Sometime later, I heard the front door and got up. "Do you know what time it is?" I asked. "We got delayed with the client," he answered casually. He took a shower and immediately fell asleep. He had always been a heavy sleeper, and lying there beside him, I had the urge to look at his phone. I opened WhatsApp and went into his team group. I still have the screenshot saved on my phone. There was a selfie. It was him and that woman. They had sent the picture to the sales team celebrating a sale, but the timestamp didn't make sense. The picture had been taken around 8-something that night, and there she was, one of the salespeople he supervised. The same woman whose eyes had made me uncomfortable from the first day. And the detail that hit me the hardest was that he had told me he was with a male salesperson, yet the photo showed him with her. The next morning, I questioned him. I think that was when he started becoming more careful and more guarded, and I started paying closer attention too. But realistically, what could I do? There was only a photo in a work group celebrating a sale. Nothing inappropriate. Nothing I could point to as proof. Just a feeling. A terrible feeling. I remember my stomach dropping when I saw it. Something isn't right, I thought. And I brought all of it to therapy. A few days later, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I reached out to her directly through social media. I said, "My husband told me he was with someone else that night, but I saw the team picture, and I saw you there. What upset me wasn't seeing you. It was the omission. He told me you're married, and..." I explained what had been bothering me, and that was when I realized exactly what kind of person she was. She sent me a huge message. Arrogant. I had never seen someone so full of herself. She replied, "I'm married and very happily married. Watch your words when you speak to me." And there I was. She was one of his salespeople. He was her supervisor. And somehow, I walked away feeling like I was the one who had done something wrong. I remember sitting in therapy afterward and saying, I did something terrible. I contacted her because something inside me was bothering me, and maybe that was immature. At my age, how did I get to this point? Having to question him, feeling like he wasn't telling me the truth, and then feeling like I had to talk to her. And deep down, I hated that I had become that woman. She sent me this long message, basically saying she was happily married and that I needed to watch my words. The whole thing came across as incredibly arrogant, and honestly, I felt like I was the one in the wrong. Because the truth was, I had no proof. When he found out she wanted to transfer to another team after I had contacted her, he got upset. "How could you do that?" he asked. "She's one of my salespeople. Why would you put her in this position?" I cried in therapy. I kept telling my therapist, "I'm wrong. I messed up. I don't know what to do." I talked to a friend about it, and after thinking about it all week, I said, "You know what? I need to call her and apologize. My issue is with my husband, not with her." So that's exactly what I did. I called her. I told her that I understood she worked with him, that they would continue making sales together, and I apologized for what had happened. I don't remember my exact words anymore, but I remember trying to be respectful. She simply said, "That's okay." She never apologized to me, not once. She still had that same arrogant tone. When I hung up, I told myself, "You handled it with class. You did the right thing." But something about her voice stayed with me. I can't explain it. It bothered me for days. Then November came, and there was another company party. There was this crowded bar close to our apartment on Goyas Avenue, and that morning he casually mentioned, "There's a company event tonight." I immediately said, "Really? Why didn't you tell me earlier? I could have bought something nice, and we could have left the girls with your mom and gone together." He replied, "Well, we're traveling for Christmas this week, and I figured you already had too much going on." But deep down, I felt something different. It felt like he had intentionally not invited me. Spouses were welcome, but I had the impression that he preferred going alone. That feeling stayed with me all the way through our Christmas trip to my grandparents' house in the countryside. By then, he had developed this new habit of drinking too much. I kept wondering, what is happening to him? After Christmas, we came back home and celebrated New Year's with his family in Ribeirão Pires. And that night, things got even worse. He drank far more than I had ever seen. His family actually tried to keep things from me because I was inside with our youngest daughter while everyone else was outside drinking, but I could tell he was going too far. At one point, I noticed a lot of movement outside and wondered what was going on. Then someone casually mentioned, "He got drunk and tripped so-and-so." I immediately thought, wait, what? I'm the type of person who wants to address things right away. I looked at him and said, "You've had enough. We're leaving. Right now." Apparently, the friend he had tripped had gotten upset and gone home. I thought it was completely irresponsible, and honestly, I was horrified. He was beyond drunk. That wasn't him. So in the middle of the night, I drove all the way back from Ribeirão Pires with him barely able to function beside me. And the whole drive, he kept repeating himself. "Do you love me? Tell me you love me. Promise you'll never leave me. No matter what happens, promise you'll never leave me." He was drunk, and I was furious. At that moment, I was angry enough to slap him. Not because of what he was saying, but because of the way he had behaved. He had embarrassed everyone, hurt a good friend, and acted in a way I had never seen before. I could tell his family was worried there would be a fight between us, but he wasn't even in a condition to argue. When we got home, I practically had to help him upstairs while carrying our daughter. I put her to bed and he passed out. The next morning, he woke up full of guilt. I told him, "You tripped your friend. You're not someone who drinks like this. What's going on?" Later that day, we went back for the New Year's lunch with the family, and eventually I tried to let it go. But the truth was, the changes were becoming impossible to ignore. He was becoming more aggressive. The drinking had become more frequent. And this was coming from a man who had never really been into alcohol before. Even socially, he barely drank. Maybe a beer here and there. Sometimes a glass of wine. Nothing like this. And yet, little by little, I was watching him become someone I barely recognized. By then, I had already noticed how much he had changed. New Year's had passed, and we were now in January. My oldest daughter's birthday is on January 31st, and instead of throwing a party, I told him I wanted us to celebrate with a family trip. We ended up planning a weekend getaway in early February. There was a resort we had always liked, so I called and made the reservation. The plan was simple. He would finish work a little earlier so we could arrive with enough time to enjoy the place together. But he showed up much later than we had agreed. And when I asked about it, he answered in a harsh tone. "You need to understand that I'm working. I'm with a client. If you're bothered, take the car and go." I remember looking at him and thinking that I didn't even feel like traveling anymore. These were the changes I had been noticing. He wasn't my partner anymore. He wasn't my friend anymore. I spent the drive in silence, upset, wondering how I was supposed to celebrate my daughter's birthday feeling that way. When we got there, our room had one king bed and 2 single beds. After dinner, without saying much, he simply went to sleep in one of the single beds and left me alone in the king bed. That had never happened before. No matter how upset we were with each other, we had never slept separately. So I called the girls over. "Come sleep with Mommy," I told them. And that was it. They slept with me while he stayed on his phone as if nothing was wrong. It was supposed to be a family trip, but he was constantly glued to his phone. At the pool, at meals, everywhere. You couldn't really feel his presence. He was physically there, but mentally somewhere else. I love taking pictures and recording videos, but even while doing that, I was paying attention to his behavior. Then he made a suggestion that struck me as odd. We were supposed to leave on Sunday or Monday, and he said, "What if you stay here a little longer with the girls? I have a client to see, and then I'll come back the next day. You can enjoy the resort some more, and then we'll head home." At first, it sounded thoughtful. I thought maybe he just wanted me to relax and enjoy the place longer, especially because the girls were having so much fun. I even thought, that's actually sweet. He told me to think about it and said he could arrange everything with the front desk, whether we needed to switch rooms or extend the stay. Later that day, he asked again, "So, have you decided?" "Yes," I said. "We're going back with you. It doesn't make sense for you to leave and then come back just to get us. We'll all go together." He looked disappointed. There was some holiday coming up after we returned, and I told him we could stay with his mother for a few days. He replied, "But I have a client to meet." "That's fine," I said. After we got back, I went to his mother's house with the girls, and he left to meet this client. At least, that's what he told me. To this day, I honestly don't know if there was ever a client. Later, he joined us at his mother's house, and eventually we all went home. Life went back to normal. School routines, schedules, everything. Then, that same week, I found out there was another company party coming up. We had barely settled back into our routine after the trip when, on Friday morning, he told me he needed the car because he had another client meeting. I said it was fine. He left early, and honestly, I didn't even pay attention to what time he had gone. I was busy getting the kids ready for school, running around with our usual morning chaos. At some point, while the girls were getting ready, I opened Instagram. Back then, I was very active on social media. I posted all the time. And because several people from his company knew me personally, many of them followed me, and I followed them back. That morning, without knowing it, I was about to see something that would stay with me. I used to share little pieces of our daily life online. Back then, I posted all the time. So that morning, while scrolling through Instagram, I suddenly saw several people from his company inside a huge bus. Everyone was wearing matching carnival shirts, holding personalized cups, laughing and filming. That's when I realized there was a company trip happening. I froze. "What is this?" I said to myself. I immediately called him, but every time I tried, it either wouldn't connect or went straight to that strange silence you get when there's no signal. I called over and over. Meanwhile, people on the bus were posting videos, and I kept looking carefully to see if I could spot him. I couldn't, so I tried to reassure myself. Maybe he really is with a client and he'll meet them later. He just didn't tell me. I kept calling. Finally, he answered. "Hey, what's up?" "Everything's fine," I said. "But you told me you were meeting a client, and I haven't been able to reach you. I just saw everyone from your company posting that they're heading out of town for a party." By then, I had already started following the stories they were posting. It was some kind of ranch or country house with a pool, lots of drinks, exactly the kind of event their manager loved putting together. But instead of explaining anything, he exploded. "So I'm not allowed to have fun? All I'm supposed to do is work and pay bills?" He kept attacking me over the phone and then hung up in my face. Friday passed, then Saturday, then Sunday. By Sunday, I still hadn't heard from him. I called his mother and told her everything. She became worried too. He hadn't contacted anyone. Eventually, she had to reach out to the regional manager to figure out where he was. At that point, we were seriously thinking about going to the police because no one knew anything. That weekend was horrible. I barely slept. I spent entire nights awake, waiting, thinking, imagining the worst. My mind felt like it was going to explode. Finally, after his mother insisted, and the regional manager contacted the supervisors and his manager, they managed to locate him. Not one person had the decency to send me a message and tell me he was okay. Not even him. His mother called me and said, "He's on his way home." I answered, "Then tell him I don't want him here." He ended up staying at his mother's house for the week. His family kept trying to reassure me. "He loves you. There's nobody else. He comes home every day after work." Meanwhile, flowers started arriving at my house. I talked about everything with a friend. I talked about it in therapy. Everyone kept telling me the same thing. This is a difficult season in your marriage. It doesn't mean there's another woman. But deep down, I kept saying, no, there's someone else. I just didn't have any proof. Still, what he had done was wrong. I decided to separate, and he stayed at his mother's house. But everyone around us, friends, family, kept insisting that we needed to sit down, talk, and work things out. After about a week, I agreed. Fine, let's talk. It was carnival weekend. His mother offered to keep the girls so we could spend the weekend together and try to reconnect. Everyone was rooting for us. So that Saturday, I got ready, and we went to a small bar nearby. But the whole evening felt strange. He barely held my hand. He sat across from me like there was no warmth left between us. And I remember thinking, what's the point of this? You sent flowers. You begged me to come back. Everyone thinks I'm the bad guy because, according to them, all you did was go too far at a company party. During our conversation, I told him honestly, I never accepted this kind of behavior, and I never thought I would have to deal with it with you. You weren't like this. I loved who you used to be. I never imagined money could change our lives this much. What's happening? Are you unhappy? Tell me what's going on. But his answer was always the same. You never let me go to company parties. There was no real conversation. We just kept going in circles. Eventually, we had a few drinks, went home, and that night we were intimate. The next morning, I woke up and found him crying in the bathroom. Not just crying, sobbing. I had never seen that man cry like that. Not even when his sister died. I asked him what was wrong. And through tears, he looked at me and said, "You don't deserve this." Those were his exact words. And every time he cried, something inside me tightened. I knew there was something he wasn't telling me. But Sunday came, and we picked up the girls, had lunch at his mother's house, and eventually went back home. Life just kept moving forward, even though deep inside I knew something was terribly wrong. After that reconciliation weekend, the carnival holiday came and went, and eventually he went back to work. Even though we had supposedly made up, I was still on high alert. Something felt wrong. I couldn't prove it, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. One afternoon, after he had returned to work, he sent me a message that said, "We need to talk later. I know you're doing your best, but this isn't working anymore." It was cold. So cold. When he came home, I said, "Okay, let's talk." Instead, he grabbed his car keys and walked out. No explanation. Nothing. I could ask whatever I wanted, but he wouldn't answer. To this day, he never sat down with me and said, "This is what happened." He never looked me in the eyes and explained anything. Not then. Later, after leaving, he would come back trying to reconnect, because I think he was going through his own internal chaos. But in those first days, I was lost. I remember calling one of my aunts and saying, "He left." She couldn't believe it, but I kept telling myself, there's something else going on. I know there is. Oddly enough, I wasn't focused on saving the marriage at that moment. I was focused on understanding why my instincts had been screaming at me for months. I wanted to know that I wasn't imagining things. I would pray and say, "God, show me the truth. No matter how much it hurts, just let me know the truth." I talked about that constantly in therapy. My therapist would ask me, "Why is knowing the truth so important to you?" And I didn't even know how to answer. Then one day she pointed out, "You've always been that way. You always need people to tell you the truth. And she was right. With friends, with family, with everyone, I always preferred painful honesty over silence. I wanted people to tell me what was happening. During those sessions, she also tried to help me see another side of things. She would say, "Now you'll have time for yourself. He'll have the girls some weekends, and you'll finally be able to do things for yourself." She talked about dinners with friends, taking care of myself, having hobbies, enjoying time alone. And little by little, I started thinking, maybe she's right. I had married when I was 19, almost 20. I had never experienced that kind of independence. My closest friends had gone to college, had groups of friends, and lived a completely different life while I became a wife and mother very young. So even though everything was still fresh, therapy helped me find at least one positive thing in the middle of all that pain. The problem was that I couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was happening. Whenever I tried to tell family members, everyone would say, "No, he would never do that to you." Nobody believed me. And little by little, I started getting sick inside. I kept asking myself, why do I wake up every day feeling this way? Why do I feel like something is wrong if I have no proof? At the same time, I felt like I had lost everything: my best friend, my partner, my support system. And now I was facing the possibility of becoming a single mother without even understanding why my marriage had fallen apart. After he left, he practically disappeared. I could call him and he wouldn't answer. But during the second week, he started showing up around lunchtime or at night saying he had come to see the girls. Sometimes he'd say he was going to the mall. Looking back, I think he was checking on me, trying to see how I was doing and what was happening. It took me a while to realize that. I always paid attention to details. When he came over, he'd sit in the living room with the girls, then say, "I'm going downstairs to grab something to eat." And he'd come back bringing things he knew I loved. One day he came back from the mall carrying stroganoff. "I brought you dinner," he said. Stroganoff was one of my favorite meals. Does that sound like the behavior of someone who simply stopped loving you? Someone who ended the marriage because there were no feelings left? My friend asked me, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, I'm not." Without even realizing it, I stopped going to therapy. I kept telling myself, this isn't fixing my life. It's not fixing anything. One day I'd feel excited, thinking, wow, I'm single now. And the next, I'd feel completely devastated because I had lost my best friend, my support system, my partner. I wasn't working. I had no idea how I was supposed to start over. Meanwhile, he kept repeating, "You and the girls won't go without anything." At that point, we were living in a rental, and he kept paying for the car and leaving me with access to the credit cards. He hadn't taken anything away from us, but it had only been a short time. Around then, my best friend called me. Every morning, I would take the girls to school, come home, and without even noticing it, I'd crawl back into bed. That became my routine. I had no energy, no motivation. She asked me how I was doing. I honestly said, "Not great." She told me she had some time off and wanted to go to the giant Ferris wheel in São Paulo. "Come with me," she said. I immediately answered, "I can't. I have to pick up the girls from school." She practically scolded me. "Why not? Drop them off, send him a message, and tell him to pick them up. They're his children too." I resisted. "He won't do it." "Send the message," she insisted. "You need to get out and distract yourself." After talking for a while, I finally said, "You know what? I'm going." So I went with her. We spent the entire day there. I texted him and asked if he could pick up the girls. He replied, "Sure." "What time are you getting home?" I didn't answer after that. The message had been delivered. He knew he had to get the girls, and that was that. Honestly, it felt wonderful. We rode the Ferris wheel. I even had some champagne while we were up there. And spending that day with my best friend brought me so much relief. On the train ride back, I kept worrying. What if he didn't pick them up? My friend said, "Relax, he picked them up." And she was right. When I got home, he was already there with the girls. But something strange happened. Almost casually, he implied that I had been with another man. "Who were you with?" he asked. "With my friend." "No, you weren't." "Yes, I was." I didn't entertain the conversation. I simply went into my room and closed the door. We still followed each other on social media back then: Instagram, Facebook, everything. What I didn't know was that Facebook comments would show up in stories instead of messages. I had no idea. One day I saw a screenshot where he had commented sarcastically on a picture of me holding champagne in Sao Paulo. "Living the luxury life, huh?" he wrote. I sent it to my friend and she immediately said, "That's weird. He's the one who left. He's the one who wanted the separation." Then she laughed and said, "Post more pictures. Let him see you're living your life." So I did. I shared a few things on Instagram, and apparently that bothered him even more. Not long after, he texted me on WhatsApp. "What were you doing in Sao Paulo? Who took those pictures?" And I remember thinking, well, this is interesting. Looks like the tables have turned. But honestly, I wasn't enjoying any of it. I wasn't trying to make him jealous. I didn't want games, I just wanted the truth. Because I kept thinking, if someone leaves because they truly don't love you anymore, why would they care? Why would they care if you're living your life, especially when they were the one who chose to walk away? I couldn't understand it. Then things became even stranger. He started showing up at the house during the week, and little by little, he began trying to sleep with me. He'd come into my room, acting sweet, trying to get close to me, and I'd tell him, "We're not together anymore." I avoided him as much as I could, but even after that, he kept questioning me about who I had been with and what I was doing. Eventually, he calmed down after realizing I had gone to the same place again with my friend. Then, one afternoon, around lunchtime, he unexpectedly showed up at the house again. I had no idea he was coming over that day. That morning, I had only taken my youngest daughter, Bella, to school. My oldest, Lorena, stayed home. Looking back now, I realize I was isolating myself, but at the time I didn't see it. I wasn't participating in the normal rhythm of the house anymore. I stopped watching TV, avoided sitting down for meals, and spent most of my time alone. I didn't recognize it then, but I do now. I think he assumed lunchtime would be the perfect time to stop by because the girls wouldn't be there. That morning, I wasn't feeling well. After taking Bella to school, I came back home and told Lorena, "You're not going to school today, okay?" She was fine with it. It was cold outside, and I just wanted to crawl back into bed. Lorena stayed quietly in her room, and I was in mine. I happened to be in the bathroom attached to my bedroom when he suddenly walked in. He had already started taking off his clothes and came straight into the bathroom. I immediately said, "No, no, no, no." My mind was already a mess, and I remember thinking, this isn't normal. Something about this doesn't feel right. Then he realized Lorena was home. He quickly got dressed again, understood I wasn't interested, and left. Sometime later, I started talking to someone on Instagram. He was someone from my past, someone I had had a crush on when I was 14, long before I met my first husband. Just innocent teenage feelings. He started liking my stories, and honestly, I didn't even know that was how people flirted these days. I would send screenshots to my best friend, completely fascinated by something that seemed so new to me. She laughed and said, "If he's liking your stories, he's interested. That's how it works. Welcome to the single world." I kept saying, "This is so weird." I didn't even know he followed me on Instagram. I kept wondering, how does he even have my account? He had gotten married around the same time I had. We had mutual friends, so our lives had followed similar paths. I checked his profile and noticed there were no pictures with a wife, only photos with his children. I thought, maybe he's single too. My friend encouraged me. If he keeps liking your stories, like his back, live a little. Eventually, we agreed to meet. She practically insisted I go. Since I had the girls, we met during the afternoon. He was available before going to work that evening, so we decided to grab coffee. I arrived a little late, and earlier that day I had already texted the girls' father. "Can you pick them up from school today?" He answered, "Sure. I'll even take them to the movies afterward." I thought, great. The date happened in the afternoon, and because he worked nights, I still had time to get home. I actually thought I'd beat everyone there. But when I arrived, the girls and my ex were already home. I walked in feeling beautiful. I had dressed up, done my hair, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt attractive again. I remember my friend calling me right after I left the coffee shop. "So tell me everything. How did you feel?" And I told her, "I felt beautiful. I felt amazing. "Did anything happen?" she asked. "Nothing. We just talked. But after all these years, I'm not that young teenager anymore. I keep wondering if he liked me." She laughed. "Didn't he kiss you?" "No." "Relax, that's not how this works. Maybe he'll text you tonight. Calm down." Meanwhile, I was already panicking, thinking I was too old. Even though we were close in age, I always joked that I felt 10 years older. When I got home, I thought I would quietly change clothes and no one would notice. But my ex saw me all dressed up. I went into my room to change, and he followed me. "Who were you with?" he asked. "Where were you?" That was when I finally answered him. "Who I was with and where I was is no longer your business. You're not going to know anything about my life anymore except things involving our children. I don't know where you're living, who you're with, or why you left. So I'm living my life too, that's all." He went back to the living room and sat with the girls. That night, he didn't want to leave. I finally said, "You're going home." Only then did he get up and leave. After that, he kept finding little excuses to come over and see the kids. Meanwhile, I kept seeing that man from my past, and honestly, I never expected things to happen so quickly. But something surprising happened. On that very first date, I looked at him and thought he was handsome. I felt attracted to him. I felt something I hadn't expected. I felt alive. And I remember thinking to myself, this is my answer. I don't love my ex-husband anymore. When people started telling me these things, a lot of pieces began falling into place. Former employees from the company started reaching out to me. Some of them had already left, so they felt comfortable talking. One by one, they shared what they knew. They told me he was involved with her. According to what they had heard, her husband had discovered the relationship and kicked her out of the house. That was when I started wondering if that was the real reason my husband had suddenly left our home too. From what people told me, after her husband found out, she rented a small place for herself, something like a studio apartment in Santo Andre. Again, I can only repeat what I was told. I don't know which details were completely accurate and which weren't. At that point, I was collecting information from different people and trying to make sense of everything. What I kept hearing was that she had become very focused on him long before I knew anything was wrong. Several former co-workers told me that he used to speak highly of me at work. He admired me and talked about our family. Then, according to them, she suddenly started getting very close to him. They said she wasn't the type of person who socialized much with people in the company, but for some reason she made a point of building a friendship with him. The story I kept hearing was that everything seemed very calculated. He had started as a salesperson and eventually became a supervisor. Around the same time, she wasn't performing particularly well in sales, so she ended up being transferred to his team. From the perspective of the people who worked there, none of that happened by accident. They told me she knew exactly when he was promoted, knew how much money he was making, and understood that his career was growing quickly. Once she joined his team, he started helping her a lot with sales. Little by little, her numbers improved, and she began standing out inside the company. People said that before that, she had never really been considered one of the top performers. As I listened to all of this, I still didn't have absolute proof of what had happened. But every new piece of information felt like confirmation of the feeling I had been carrying for months. The feeling that I wasn't imagining things. The feeling that something had been happening right in front of me the entire time. At that point, I decided I needed to know the truth once and for all. I reached out to someone and asked, "Do you know who her husband is? Can you give me his contact information?" I just wanted answers. Eventually, I got his number. I called him and said, "I heard you're married to her and I'm married to him. Some things have reached me and I just wanted to hear your side and find out whether any of this is true." He immediately corrected me. "If you're talking about her, first of all, I'm not her husband," he said. "I lived alone and at the time she had nowhere to stay, so she moved in with me. We were dating, not married." That's exactly how he explained it. Then he said, "I had already started getting suspicious. Honestly, I thought she might be involved with the regional manager because he had a reputation for getting involved with people at work. I suspected him. He told me that when he reached his limit, he asked her to leave. He said he had called her to come get her things, but she never showed up. So he packed everything into bags and gave them to her father. He also told me he'd noticed changes. She had started coming home late, suddenly began making more money, and started showing up with expensive sneakers and other costly things. My ex-husband loved expensive brands and shopping, so hearing that stood out to me. "But whether it's your husband or not, I can't tell you," he said. I thanked him and told him I'd keep our conversation private. I even said that if he ever wanted to meet and talk in person, I would be open to that. He answered politely, "No problem. If you ever need to talk, you have my number." After that conversation, I already knew enough. I had the truth. So I sent a message to my ex-husband. I told him I knew everything. I told him he hadn't left because I supposedly didn't let him attend company parties. I don't remember every word I used, but I ended the message by saying something like, "By the way, it was a pleasure speaking with," and I mentioned her ex-boyfriend's name. That man's name would become part of my nightmare. I remember that day as one of the worst days of my life. By then, she already had access to everything. His phone, his WhatsApp. She was the one answering. As soon as my message was seen, my phone exploded. Call after call started coming in. She already had my number saved. I didn't answer. I couldn't understand it. I sent a message to my ex-husband, and she was the one reading it. Then she sent me a huge text. "Why don't you answer? Aren't you woman enough?" she wrote. Then she started mocking me. "Oh, so you went looking for him? You two would make such a beautiful couple. Enjoy yourselves. I'm very happy and enjoying myself too." She went on and on. I read everything, but I never replied. Then she started calling again. At one point, she contacted me using another number connected to the company, and then she crossed a line I will never forget. She sent me a picture of my nightstand. My medication was right there. By then, I was already taking antidepressants. The second I saw that picture, I broke down crying. I thought, she never entered my bedroom. He sent that picture to her. My best friend, my partner, my husband, the father of my daughters. He had shared something deeply personal with someone else. Being betrayed was painful enough, but exposing something so private, my depression, my medication, that destroyed something inside me. I remember thinking, I don't know this man anymore. This isn't the person I married. Soon after, I told his mother what had happened. She even stepped in and called the woman herself. By then, everything was out in the open. She knew that I knew. This was around April, if I remember correctly. My lawyer told me, "There's not much else you can do right now. Save every screenshot and file a police report." So that's what I did. I filed the report and tried to move forward. But from that moment on, the real nightmare began. She knew I knew. He knew I knew. And I realized they were both afraid of one thing above all else. They were terrified that I would go to the company. And the reason was simple. I lived practically across the street from it. Those threatening messages she sent to my phone were her way of showing me what she was capable of before I did anything. Even then, I knew one thing about myself. You would never see me screaming, causing scenes, or physically confronting anyone. That's just not who I am, and I knew none of that would solve anything. There were moments when I imagined going to the company and exposing everything, creating a huge scandal. But every time I stopped myself, what would it change? Nothing. The only satisfaction I had was knowing that they knew I knew. She knew that, at any moment, I could expose everything. Even though, honestly, everyone there already seemed to know. Still, I lived with anxiety. I kept thinking, what's next? Is he going to take everything away from me? And that's exactly what started happening. By May, things changed. He stopped leaving me with access to money the way he had before. Instead, he would hand me a card and say, "Use this for groceries or whatever you need, and that's it." At the same time, he became more distant. He barely saw the girls anymore. Since I had discovered the truth, he no longer had any reason to keep trying with me. There were no more excuses to come upstairs, no more attempts to get close. Everything changed. I looked around and thought, okay, he's paying the rent, the bills are covered, I still have my car. I'll hire a lawyer, fight for my rights and my daughter's rights, and move on. But then something happened with my car. I had a Jeep, and I had never had any major problems with it before. One day it broke down close to his workplace, and out of habit, I called him. My car broke down. I'm stranded, I told him. He immediately said he was coming. I managed to pull over at a gas station, and he handled everything. The car was taken to the dealership to be inspected. After that, he started giving me excuse after excuse. He said there were problems with the car, that repairs would take time, that something serious had happened. Then he claimed the repairs would cost $20,000. I didn't understand anything about cars, and I was even willing to help if necessary. But the explanations never made sense. Then it hit me. The car was in his name. When the dealership finished evaluating it, they probably contacted the registered owner, which was him. He picked up the car, and from that day on, I never saw it again. I kept telling him, I need the car. I have to take the girls to school. I need to go grocery shopping. We built our whole routine around having a car. But every time I asked, he became rude and impatient. It's still being repaired. I'm taking it somewhere cheaper. I'm waiting for another mechanic. There was always another excuse. I even asked his mother to talk to him. She did, but he gave her the same answers. Eventually, I accepted that I had probably lost that car. More than that, I realized he was keeping me in a constant state of anxiety. As the weeks went by, he practically disappeared. Lorena and Bella missed him terribly. He had left at the end of February, and then March passed, April passed, and by May, he was no longer the father who took them to school, attended meetings, or participated in their daily lives. Then one day, out of nowhere, he asked me, "When are you leaving the apartment?" I looked at him, confused. "What?" "You're moving out," I answered calmly. "Fine. Let me organize everything first." I had already researched moving companies. I wanted professionals to come, disassemble the furniture, transport everything, and put it back together in the new place. It was expensive, but I didn't have a support system. My family barely even knew I was getting divorced. I couldn't just call someone and ask for help carrying furniture. It was too much information, too much pain, and I was handling everything alone. He said, "Okay, get some estimates." I talked to my lawyer, and he immediately told me, "Do not leave. You have the right to stay. Don't move out." So I delayed making any decisions. Then one day, he informed me, "I already scheduled your move." I was stunned. "What do you mean?" And when the day arrived, a moving truck showed up. I said, "No, I'm not leaving." He started yelling at me. The day before, he had already arranged everything. He had sent me screenshots showing that he had scheduled the move with the condominium and reserved the loading area for the truck. But I had never agreed to any of it. The day before the move, he came by the apartment just to make sure I was actually packing. I had gone out and bought boxes, and deep down I felt like I needed to leave. I didn't want a war. I didn't want constant fights. I thought, if he wants me out that badly, then I'll go. More than anything, I wanted peace. I wanted to come home and know that he would never walk through that door again. Whatever was meant to happen would happen. When the moving truck arrived, it broke my heart. There were only 2 men loading everything. My oldest daughter and I had stayed up all night packing boxes together. I brought my china cabinet, our dining table, the beds, and the TV. Those were the things that came with me to the new place. The apartment I moved into had only recently been handed over by the builder. There were barely any residents yet, and security was practically non-existent. I didn't feel safe there, but I had no choice. I had an electrician install lights, bought a stove, and little by little I made the place livable. Most of our belongings stayed inside boxes for almost a year. There was no wardrobe and no dresser. I told him, "I'm not moving without somewhere to put our clothes. I'll buy them myself." Instead, he bought a wardrobe and a dresser. That made me think maybe he was willing to help. Maybe he was trying to do the right thing for the girls. I told myself that if he was willing to help, I would accept it and rebuild my life. But that wasn't what it was. As soon as I was out, everything changed. The very next day, a neighbor from the old building, who already knew what was happening, sent me a picture. Her car was parked in my garage space. I hadn't managed to move everything. I used to record a lot of videos, so I had softboxes, ring lights, filming equipment, my daughter's costumes, and many personal things left behind. Before leaving, I had told him, "I'll come back during the week and get the rest. There are too many delicate things to put in the truck." There were clothes, keepsakes, even baby clothes, and little shoes I had saved from when my daughters were born. There were so many things that simply didn't fit in that small truck. But when I went back, my facial access no longer worked. I couldn't get inside. Just like that, I was locked out of the apartment. My clothes, personal belongings, and precious memories were still inside, and I had no way to retrieve them. By June, he had blocked me on WhatsApp. I no longer had direct contact with him. If I sent a message, he would answer days later, if he answered at all. I moved into that apartment during the week of my 30th birthday. I had been so excited about turning 30, but when that week arrived, there was nothing in my new place except boxes. I sank deeper into depression. I would look around and think, we don't even have a couch. We're all sleeping in the same bed. I sacrificed so much. I fought so hard beside him. I could accept that maybe he no longer loved me, but I kept asking myself, what about the girls? Why are they paying the price too? Little by little, he started pulling away from them as well. There were barely any calls or visits anymore. Then one day, someone from the company sent me a picture. My car was parked in the company lot. The second I saw it, I grabbed my spare key and left. I wasn't even thinking. The company was only about 12 minutes away. I knew there was a side entrance through the garage that led to the back parking area, so I went straight there. And there it was. My car. The first thing I did was pull out my phone and start recording. I wanted proof for my lawyer. The car had never been broken. He simply didn't want to give it back to me. Then I noticed an HB20 parked beside it, and she stepped out of that car. I don't remember her exact words, but she immediately told me to leave. I looked at her and said calmly, I'm standing at the company where my husband still works, at least legally speaking, and you're an employee here. She looked at me and said something like, you better leave right now or you'll regret it. And then she attacked me. I honestly don't remember every detail. I just remember defending myself. The only marks she managed to leave were scratches on my face with those long artificial nails. I had marks there for months. I remember grabbing her hair while trying to protect myself, and punches were exchanged between both of us. I had no idea she would physically attack me inside the company. I knew she could be arrogant and aggressive, but I never imagined things would go that far. And what hurts is that I never went there to scream at her or make a scene. I spoke calmly, in a normal voice. Because in my mind, the person who had betrayed me was him. She wasn't the one who had made vows to me. He was. While all of this was happening, he was inside the company, working. The entire day before the move, he kept checking the apartment to see if I was actually packing. It was literally just one day before everything changed. I went out and bought boxes, and deep down I felt like I needed to leave. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want a war. If he wanted me gone, then I would go. More than anything, I wanted peace. I wanted to come home without wondering if he would walk through the door again. Whatever happened next, I would deal with it. When the small moving truck arrived, it broke my heart. There were only 2 men carrying everything. My oldest daughter and I had stayed up all night packing. I brought a china cabinet, the dining table, our beds, and the television. Those were the things I managed to bring to the new apartment. I had only recently received the keys to the place. There were barely any residents living there yet, and security wasn't even fully set up. I didn't feel safe, but I had no choice. I hired an electrician to install lights, bought a stove, and that was it. Everything stayed inside boxes for almost a year. There was no closet, no dresser, nothing. I told him I couldn't move without at least those basics, and he actually bought a wardrobe and a dresser. I thought maybe he was willing to help for the sake of the girls. Maybe he wanted to make sure they were okay. I told myself that if he was willing to do that, then I would accept it and rebuild my life. But that wasn't his intention. The very next day after I moved out, my neighbor from the old building sent me a picture. Her car was already parked in my garage space. I hadn't been able to take everything with me. I filmed a lot of videos back then, so I had soft boxes, ring lights, recording equipment, my daughter's costumes, and many personal things left behind. Before leaving, I had told him I would come back during the week to pick up whatever didn't fit in the truck. I wanted to carry the more delicate items myself, but when I went back, my facial recognition no longer worked. I couldn't get inside. Just like that, I was locked out. There were things I desperately wanted back. Tiny clothes from when my daughters were babies, Little shoes, keepsakes, my own clothes, personal belongings. There simply hadn't been enough room in that truck. After that, I moved into the new apartment, and suddenly he blocked me on WhatsApp. I no longer had direct contact with him. If I sent a message, he would answer days later. By then, it was June. I had moved during the week of my 30th birthday. I had been so excited about turning 30 that year, but instead, I found myself sitting among boxes with almost nothing in the apartment. I sank even deeper into depression. I would look around and think, we don't even have a couch. We're all sleeping in the same bed. I had worked so hard beside him. I had sacrificed so much. Maybe it was okay if he didn't love me anymore. But what about our daughters? Maybe he had discarded me, but he was abandoning them too. He slowly stopped being present. He stopped showing up. He wasn't taking them to school anymore. He wasn't involved in anything. And then someone from the company sent me a picture. My car was parked at his workplace. The moment I saw that picture, I grabbed the spare key I still had. I wasn't thinking clearly. The company was only about 12 minutes away, and I drove there immediately. I knew there was a side entrance through the garage that led to the back parking lot, so I went in that way. And there it was, my car. The first thing I did was pull out my phone and start recording. I wanted proof from my lawyer. He had the car the entire time. He simply refused to give it back. Then I noticed a gray Hyundai parked beside it, and she stepped out of that car. I don't remember her exact words, but she told me to leave the company. I calmly answered, "My husband still works here, at least legally speaking, and you work under him." She immediately threatened me. "You need to leave right now, or you'll see what happens." Before I could even react, she attacked me. I remember defending myself, but everything happened so fast. Suddenly, several women from the company were pulling us apart. She had those long acrylic nails and managed to scratch my face. I had marks for months. I grabbed her hair and fought back. It became a physical fight from both sides, but I was defending myself. I never expected her to attack me inside the company. I had never gone there intending to scream or make a scene. I was speaking in a normal voice. I always believed that the person who had betrayed me was him, not her. He was the one who had made vows to me. While he was working inside, I suddenly felt several women pulling me away to stop the fight. They sat me down and asked if I was okay and if I wanted water. But even after the fight had ended, she grabbed my purse and threw it toward Avenida Goyas. She started dumping my things into the street. Then he finally appeared. "What are you doing?" he yelled, not even knowing what had happened. And then he came toward me. He was going to attack me. The men from the company had to hold him back. At that moment, an attorney who had an office upstairs came down. He told me he was a criminal lawyer. "I saw everything from upstairs. Come with me. We'll call the police. Sit down, have some water, and wait." So I went upstairs with him and called the police. The officers treated me with respect. One of them was a woman. By that point, I was angry with God. My family meant everything to me, and I couldn't understand why none of this had been stopped. I would pray and say, "God, show me what to do. Please take away this pain." But all I felt was silence. Silence over and over again. I couldn't understand why God, who values family so much, had allowed mine to fall apart. The police asked if he had actually hit me. "No," I answered truthfully. "He didn't." Then they explained that there was nothing they could do about the car because legally it belonged to him. They advised me to continue the legal process and seek half its value, which I was already doing. I felt humiliated. Employees from the company were standing everywhere watching. Anyone who knew me knew I hadn't gone there to make a scene. Everything had simply exploded. Later, I remembered that some of the women from the company had stayed beside me, offering me water and trying to help. Almost nobody had sided with them. One of the officers asked me, "If you press charges, everyone will have to go to the police station. Is that what you want?" "Yes," I said. "That's exactly what I want." I rode to the hospital with the officers first. A male officer and the female officer stayed with me. The nurses checked my blood pressure, and while they were doing that, she walked right into the room. Even with the officers standing there, she looked at me with arrogance, as if she was enjoying it. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The female officer looked at me and said, You're beautiful, you don't deserve this. Look at the situation he put you in. She was clearly disturbed by that woman's behavior. As soon as she left the room, one of the nurses looked at me and said, "He will pay for all of this one day." I don't know the whole story, but the fact that she walked in here and tried to intimidate you in front of police officers and hospital staff says everything about who she is. I had a terrible headache and my blood pressure was high. I felt nauseous too, but I had never experienced anything like that before. From there, we went to the police station. I spent the entire day there. They placed me in a separate room because her father and stepmother had already arrived. At one point, I stepped into the hallway to send a voice message because I was desperate. My daughters were still at school, and I had no idea who was going to pick them up. The only thing I could think about was my daughters. I had a terrible headache, and while I was standing in the hallway, her stepmother and she kept trying to intimidate me. Even inside the police station, they were making threats and saying things to me. Eventually, the female officer took me into a separate room to give me some privacy. I remember thinking, is this normal? Even inside a police station, nobody is going to stop this. I sat there waiting while both reports were being processed. During that time, the officer talked to me and asked if I had a father, a brother, or any male figure I trusted. Then she looked at me and said, "You're safe in here, but I don't think you'll be protected once you walk out that door." When she said that, I almost broke down. Because the truth was, my husband had always been my best friend. He had been the person I trusted the most. And now I was sitting in a police station, listening to someone tell me I might not be safe outside. I kept replaying everything in my mind. People had seen me being attacked. They had seen me fighting back. That wasn't who I was. I wasn't that kind of person. Part of me started blaming myself. Why had I gone there? Why had I put myself in that situation? But then I would think, I just wanted my car. That's all. I can't believe I'm walking away with nothing. I'm being punished for something I didn't do. I wasn't the one who cheated. I wasn't the one who left. So why am I the one paying the price? The officer stayed beside me the entire time. She was incredibly kind. Eventually, I had to call my brother and my father. That was one of the hardest things for me. I had to tell them I was sitting inside a police station. Why? They asked. Because she attacked me. And suddenly, something so private was no longer private. That's what hurt. These things spread. Family members find out. Friends hear about it. People start talking. You lose control over your own story. And that's when I realized I no longer had control over any of it. People were going to know. And that hurt me deeply. Hours went by and we still hadn't left the station. I started worrying about the girls. I texted my father, but I also realized something about myself. I had always struggled to ask for help. Then someone came to mind. There was a mother at my daughter's school. Her daughter was my daughter's best friend. A few days earlier, her little girl had gone home and told her, "Mommy, my friend is really sad because her parents separated. Her mom just sleeps all the time." And she was right. By then, I was taking antidepressants and sleeping constantly. I wasn't sitting at the dinner table anymore. I wasn't the happy, energetic mom I used to be. I didn't dress up. I didn't want to go out. I wasn't myself. My daughter had shared her sadness with her best friend, and that girl's mother had reached out to me before all this happened. She had said, "My daughter told me a little about what you're going through. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. And I want you to know something. I went through this too. My husband and I divorced. It was painful. But after everything was finalized, we eventually reconciled. I don't know what will happen in your case, but I want you to know you don't have to go through this alone." I thought her kindness was beautiful. The next day, she even sent cake and other things to my house. She welcomed me with so much compassion. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe I wasn't completely alone. My friends were single. None of them had lived through something like this. But she had. She understood. So, sitting there in the police station, she was the first person I thought of. I called her and asked, "Would you be able to pick up Lorena for me? I'm at the police station right now. I'll explain everything later." Without hesitation, she said, "Of course. She can stay at my house, and whenever you're done, you can come get her." That solved one problem. But then I remembered Bella. I didn't have anyone I trusted to help with her. By then, my father had arrived at the police station. The officer had already spoken with him and my brother and warned them not to argue or fight with anyone. She even said, "Sir, if things get out of hand, we'll end up arresting everyone, so please avoid any confrontation." My father stayed beside me in that room until the very end. My brother stepped out at some point to take care of something. My father barely even looked at my ex-husband. They hardly exchanged any words. At one point, my dad went outside to smoke. When he came back, he sat down and quietly said something that surprised me. "Her father actually seems like a decent man." The day before the move, he actually came to the apartment to make sure I was packing, literally one day before. I went out, bought boxes, and I remember feeling deep down that I needed to leave. I didn't want a war. I didn't want endless fighting. If he wanted me gone, then I would leave. More than anything, I wanted peace. I wanted to come home and know that he would never walk through that door again. Whatever happened next, I would deal with it. When the moving truck arrived, it broke my heart. It wasn't even a real moving company, just two young guys carrying everything. My oldest daughter and I had spent the entire night packing boxes. I brought the china cabinet, the dining table, the beds, and the TV. Those were the things I had originally brought when we moved into that apartment. The place I was moving into had just been handed over by the builder. There were barely any residents, hardly any security, and I didn't feel safe there. But I moved anyway. I just had an electrician install some lights, bought a stove, and lived surrounded by boxes. Honestly, it stayed that way for almost a year. I told him I couldn't move without basic furniture. There was no wardrobe, no dresser. To my surprise, he actually bought those things. And I thought maybe, just maybe, he was willing to help for the sake of the girls. Maybe we could handle this like adults and I could start over. But that wasn't what was happening. The very next day after I moved, a neighbor from the old building who already knew everything sent me a picture. Her car was already parked in my spot. I hadn't been able to take everything with me. I filmed a lot of videos for work, so I still had soft boxes, ring lights, recording equipment, my daughter's costumes, and so many personal things left behind. I told him I would come back during the week and slowly pick everything up because I didn't want fragile items thrown into the truck. But when I went back, my facial access no longer worked. I couldn't get inside. My daughter's baby clothes were still there. Tiny shoes, keepsakes, my own clothes, personal belongings. Things I simply hadn't had time to pack because they wouldn't fit in that little truck. Then June came, and he blocked me on WhatsApp. There was basically no communication anymore. If I sent a message, he would answer days later. I had moved during the week of my birthday. I was turning 30, and I had been so excited about it that year. Instead, I sat in a home with nothing but boxes. There wasn't even a couch. My daughters and I were sharing the same bed. I kept thinking about everything I had sacrificed, everything we had built together. Maybe he didn't love me anymore, but what about the girls? I could accept being discarded, but I couldn't understand him pulling away from them too. He stopped being present. He stopped showing up. There was barely any contact. Then someone from his company sent me a picture. My car. It was sitting in the company parking lot. The second I saw it, I grabbed the spare key and drove there without even thinking. I lived only about 12 minutes away. I knew there was a side entrance through the garage that led directly to the employee parking lot. I went that way. And there it was. My car. I immediately took out my phone and started recording because I wanted proof for my attorney. The car wasn't broken. He simply didn't want to give it back. Then I noticed an HB20 parked beside it. And she stepped out. I don't remember her exact words, but she told me to leave. I calmly answered, "I'm at the company where my husband still works. Legally, he's still my husband, and you work here." She looked at me and said, "You're leaving right now, or you'll see what happens." And then she attacked me. Even now, I remember defending myself more than anything else. Suddenly, there were women from the company pulling us apart. She had those long gel nails, and the only place she managed to reach was my face. I had scratches that stayed visible for months. I grabbed her hair and fought back. I punched her while trying to protect myself. It became physical on both sides. I had never expected her to attack me. I knew she could be arrogant and hostile, but I never imagined she would physically assault me inside the company. I hadn't gone there to scream or make a scene. I spoke to her calmly, at a normal tone. In my mind, she wasn't the person who had betrayed me. He was. He was the one who had made promises to me. Then I saw several women pulling me away and trying to end the fight. They sat me down and asked if I was okay, if I wanted water. And even after everything had stopped, she grabbed my purse and started throwing it into Avenida Goiás. She dumped my things out in the street like I was trash. That's when he finally appeared. "What are you doing?" he asked, because he hadn't seen how it started. And then he came after me. Yes, he tried to attack me. The men from the company had to hold him back. There was a criminal lawyer whose office was upstairs. He had witnessed everything from above. He came down and asked me, "Do you want to come upstairs with me? We'll call the police. I saw everything." I went upstairs. He gave me coffee and water while we waited. When the police arrived, I explained that I had only gone there to recover my car. The officers treated me with kindness and respect. At that point in my life, I had lost faith. My family meant everything to me. I prayed constantly, asking God to show me what to do, to take away the pain, but all I felt was silence. I couldn't beg a man to come back. I couldn't accept sharing him with another woman. I simply couldn't. And I kept asking myself, if family mattered so much to God, why had mine been destroyed? The officers asked whether he had physically assaulted me, and I told them no, because technically he hadn't. They also explained that there was nothing they could do about the car because it was legally registered in his name. I would have to seek my rights through court, which I was already doing. There were employees everywhere watching, and I felt humiliated. Anyone who truly knew me knew I wasn't the kind of person who went looking for drama, but things had gotten completely out of control. Some women from the company stayed by my side. One brought me water. Almost nobody seemed to stand with them. A female officer asked me, "If you press charges, we're all going to the station right now. Is that what you want?" I answered, "Yes." First, they took me to the hospital. She arrived too, acting superior, walking into the room while nurses checked my blood pressure. Her attitude was so arrogant that even the officers looked uncomfortable. One of the nurses waited until she stepped out and quietly told me, "Whatever you're going through, he will answer for it." I don't know the whole story, but someone who walks into a room full of police officers just to intimidate you shows exactly who she is. I had a terrible headache and nausea. My blood pressure was high. Then we spent the entire day at the police station. Her stepmother was there, threatening me even inside the station. The officers eventually put me in a separate room for my own safety. One of the officers looked at me and asked, "Do you have any male figure protecting you? Because I don't think you're safe once you leave here." That question shattered me. He had been my best friend, the person I trusted most. And suddenly, I was sitting inside a police station, replaying everything in my head, blaming myself for going there at all. But all I had wanted was my car. I hadn't cheated. I hadn't abandoned my family. So why was I the one being punished? I finally called my father and my brother. Having to tell them I was at a police station was humiliating. My private pain had become public. I realized I no longer had control over who would know. Hours passed, and I still hadn't left. I reached out to the mother of my daughter's best friend. My daughter had confided in her friend about how sad she was because her parents had separated and because I spent most of my time sleeping due to the antidepressants. That mother had reached out to me days earlier. She told me she had gone through a divorce herself and later reconciled with her husband. She brought cake to my house and showed me so much kindness. So that day, she was the person I trusted. Without hesitation, she said, "I'll pick up Lorena. She can stay with us. You come whenever you're done." My youngest daughter, Bela, had nowhere to go, so my father picked her up from school and brought her to the station with permission from the officer. When she walked into that room and saw my face scratched and swollen from crying, she quietly touched my cheek and asked, "Mommy, are you okay?" I told her I was. But she looked at me with such sadness. Eventually, the reports were finished. They released them first and kept me there a little longer so I could leave safely. When we finally got home, it was already July 4th. The next day was my youngest daughter's birthday. I was swollen, exhausted, and broken inside. But I put on makeup and took the girls to a little farm in Cotia. I wasn't going to let her birthday become another casualty of everything that had happened. Then, that same week, several police officers showed up at my door. There had been an anonymous report accusing me of abusing my children and mentioning that I was taking antidepressants. The details were too specific. Whoever had made the report knew intimate things about my life, and I couldn't understand it. They already had everything: the apartment, the car, each other. What more did they want from me? A few days later, strangers started calling me asking about refrigerators and furniture I was supposedly selling. I asked one man to send me the ad. When I opened the link, I froze. Someone had posted fake ads using my PICS information, my phone number, my address, and even my apartment number. None of the items belonged to me. Then I remembered the police report. I ran to get my copy and saw that my address was there, and that's when everything clicked. If my copy had my address, then hers did too. And suddenly, I understood exactly how they had found me. He and his girlfriend traveled together while I tried to survive those months one day at a time. In the middle of everything, the legal process had started. My attorney filed for temporary child support and also began the process of dissolving our common law union. I remember thinking, okay, at least things are moving forward now. After about 2 months, temporary support was finally set. Bella would receive 20%, which covered her rights as our daughter. At the same time, my lawyer was working on the property division case, which, incredibly, is still ongoing to this day. Our union was officially dissolved around June during the same week as my birthday. I remember feeling relieved, thinking that at least one chapter had finally closed. We no longer had that legal bond. Now the only major asset left to divide was the car. And that was when another shock came. He claimed he had sold the vehicle for only 5,000 rays because, according to him, it had suffered mechanical problems and required repairs that cost more than 20,000 rays. He said there was still financing attached to it and insisted that the car had practically no value left. That dispute remains in court even now. When my lawyer filed for the dissolution, he also requested temporary support for me because I had spent years away from the workforce. He presented evidence showing that I had been assaulted when I went to retrieve the car and that many of my belongings had been left behind in the apartment. I thought maybe the court would take everything into consideration. Instead, the judge ruled that I had not suffered damages. According to him, because I was young, I was capable of working and supporting myself. Even the assault, in his opinion, had not caused any compensable harm. So that was it. I didn't receive any support. I still didn't have my car. Honestly, when I read that decision, it felt as if the paperwork had simply been signed without anyone truly reading what I had lived through. I couldn't believe someone had looked at everything and concluded that none of it mattered. But after 2.5 years, something finally changed. About 3 months ago, the judge acknowledged that there appeared to be fraud involving the sale of the car. For the first time, I felt like someone was actually paying attention. The buyer of the vehicle was summoned to provide information. At first, he had one attorney representing him, but later another lawyer took over the case. Even so, the arguments remained the same. They continued insisting that the car had major repairs, that it had been sold for 5,000 Rs in cash, and that I was only entitled to half of that amount, which made no sense to me. Because during a settlement hearing, when the judge brought up the vehicle, he had actually said that if I wanted, he would transfer the car to me, and I would pay him the 5,000 Rs. So how could I suddenly only deserve 2,000? Nothing about it added up. Meanwhile, life kept going. Over those 2.5 years, Bella would occasionally tell me about arguments between him and his girlfriend. I never pushed for details, but I could tell things weren't peaceful. Then this year, in January, school season arrived. I paid for everything myself. The backpack, lunchbox, school supplies, water bottle, everything. He didn't help with any of those expenses. Since he wasn't formally employed, there were no bonuses, vacation pay, or anything extra. Financially, I was carrying it all. The judge had ordered that he pick Bella up every Friday evening and bring her back Sunday night. But at some point, he started asking if he could pick her up directly from school on Fridays and drop her off Monday morning at school instead. At first, I thought maybe he simply wanted more time with his daughter. I actually believed he was changing. But later I realized something else. I believe it wasn't about spending more time with Bella. It was about avoiding me. That arrangement meant he didn't have to come to my home, see me, or have any direct contact with me. And contact between us barely existed anyway. Whenever messages arrived, my lawyer would investigate, because the phone numbers constantly changed. Other people had different numbers for him. I honestly believe some of the messages came through numbers connected to his girlfriend or the company. Still, Bella had always had a peaceful relationship with both of them. At least, that was how it seemed. Then one day this year, he picked her up from school. She had left carrying the tablet I had given her, and when she came back, she was carrying a completely different tablet. The issue wasn't that the tablet had broken. Accidents happen. Things fall and break. I honestly believe that. When Bella came home and said, "Mommy, Dad broke my tablet, but he already bought me a new one. It's huge," I wasn't upset. I actually thought, if it was an accident, there was no need to rush out and buy another one. He could have simply sent me a message saying, "Hey, I accidentally broke her tablet, I'll replace it." That's what I thought healthy communication between parents should look like. But I wasn't told anything. He told my older daughter at school that Bella's tablet had broken and that the new one was already in her backpack, yet he never said a word to me. We had no communication. I didn't even know which number was really his anymore. He would unblock me when it suited him and disappear again afterward. There was no real contact between us. Sometime later, Bella came back from another visit, and her insulated water bottle was broken. I looked at it and thought, that bottle was expensive. We had just bought it a month ago. I couldn't even imagine how it had broken. Bella quickly said, "Mom, it was an accident." I wasn't accusing her. I simply commented on it. Then I sent a message. "Hi. First the tablet, now the water bottle." The response I received was strange. He said, "You're right, I'll replace it. She doesn't deserve to have broken things." Something about that wording felt odd, but I had a million other things to deal with, so I moved on. A few days later, Bella came home without the container that fit inside her lunchbox. According to her, that had broken too, and Dad had already bought a new one. At that point, I started wondering what was going on. Everything she took over there seemed to come back broken and immediately replaced. None of it made sense. Then one day, while I was washing dishes, Bella casually said, "Mom, Dad told me I have to be careful because you turn everything into drama." That sentence hit me immediately. Something was happening, and I wasn't supposed to know about it. I stayed quiet. Then, after the lunch container incident, Bella came home excited and said, "Mommy, you don't know what happened." I was in my bedroom and I told her, "Tell me everything." She said they had been fighting again. According to Bella, his girlfriend had broken things around the house and even threatened to kill her fish. Bella said she had been drinking beer and poured it into the aquarium while asking in a loud and angry voice, "Are you scared, Bella?" That was how my 7-year-old described it. She also said his girlfriend had broken the lunch container again. Suddenly, everything clicked. "So she was the one breaking the tablet and all these other things?" I asked. Bella nodded. "Yes, they fight a lot. Dad said she needs therapy and that she's going to get help. He told me I shouldn't tell you, but I really wanted to." That was exactly how she said it. And finally, all those broken items since January started making sense. I didn't confront anyone. I simply shared online that some of Bella's things kept coming home broken. And immediately, people began telling me not to blame the stepmother. That wasn't my point. I had always felt there was something off about her character, but what worried me now was something much bigger. Today, it's broken belongings. But what happens if one day they have another violent fight while my daughter is there? That thought terrified me. After I talked about the situation on TikTok and the videos started getting attention, she began posting videos of her own. Relatives sent them to me. She posted screenshots of conversations between me and him, trying to prove she had never been the other woman. One screenshot was probably from when he first left home, where I was begging him to talk because we were a family. Another time, relatives sent me a video where she claimed the hardest thing about dating a man with children wasn't the children, but the obsessive spirit, meaning the ex-wife. Then, after I spoke publicly about my concerns, she started posting videos brushing my daughter's hair and acting like the perfect stepmother. That's when I realized how manipulative she could be. I hadn't even shared everything Bella had told me. I had only mentioned the broken belongings, but suddenly, she was using my daughter's image to prove to everyone that she was a wonderful stepmother. I don't know if she was trying to convince her friends or herself. All I know is my truth. And I know what happened to me. There were many things I hadn't spoken about publicly. For example, Bella later told me that his girlfriend had hit him. Another day she said, "Mom," she threw a pan at Dad's face. I don't believe an 8-year-old would invent things like that. Once, Bella told me they were fighting again and that her father had left her alone in the elevator while he chased after his girlfriend. According to Bella, she had destroyed things around the house again. It seemed like there was always shouting, arguing, throwing phones, and chaos. Whenever Bella went there, she was surrounded by conflict. But something interesting happened after I spoke about it on TikTok. Everything suddenly changed. During the last 2 weekends, I asked Bella, "Sweetheart, is everything okay?" And she answered, "Everything's fine, Mommy. No fights, no stories, nothing." And honestly, that's why I feel that speaking up on TikTok has been protecting my daughter. That's why I feel like speaking out protects my daughter. If I share something publicly, I truly believe she'll think twice before doing it again. And I know exposing my life online isn't easy. People always have opinions. Some say, "You haven't moved on." Others say, "You're just jealous because your daughter has a stepmother." But that has never been the issue. I'm secure in the love I have for my daughter, and I know how much she loves me. Nothing and no one can change that. In the beginning, I used to think that maybe he deserved the kind of person he chose. After everything she did to me, after seeing what I believe is a lack of character, I thought that someone who stays with a person like that must share the same values. Because if he truly had integrity, he wouldn't have remained beside someone capable of doing those things. So I used to tell myself, this is the woman he deserves. And if she's breaking things, attacking him, arguing in front of his daughter, then that's between them. But what hurts me is that these fights seem to happen when Bella is there. She only visits every other weekend. Why can't they argue when she's not around? Why does my daughter have to witness that? To me, that says a lot about who she is. And for a long time, I thought, well, this is what he chose. But recently, my prayers changed. I told God, I know this is the woman he chose. Maybe this is what he deserves. But I'm asking you as a mother. I prayed, please stay beside my daughter when I can't. Because I'm afraid. I'm truly afraid that one day something worse could happen. And I realized something. Instead of praying about him, I started praying for her. I started asking God to bring into her life a wonderful stepmother someday. Someone kind, honest, loving, and full of values and principles. Not because he deserves it, but because my daughter does. My dream is simple. I want to be able to send a message and hear, everything is fine. She's okay. She's taking her medicine. Don't worry. I dream of respectful communication, so I keep praying differently now. I ask God to place good people around my daughter, people who will care for her when she isn't with me. Yesterday was Bella's birthday. Last year, she spent it with me, and he asked for a video call. I accepted, and his girlfriend was there with him. Bella talked to both of them, and I allowed it because I thought about what was best for her. So this year, I expected the same courtesy. I thought if Bella was with him, he would let me speak to her. I was at work all day, from 9 in the morning, and I was busy. But everyone around me could see how anxious I was. I kept checking my phone, hoping for a response. Nothing. I reached out several times. I even asked his aunt, please tell him I just want to wish her a happy birthday. But I never received an answer. And that's what hurts me. Because I've always tried to put Bella first. I accepted video calls. I accepted uncomfortable situations. I swallowed my pride for my daughter. But he doesn't do the same. When Bella is with him, I have no contact. On her birthday, I couldn't even tell my own daughter happy birthday. Nothing. The only communication I get is usually a message a few hours before he drops her off saying, we're on the way. That's it. We don't talk. I can't call him. I can't have a conversation. There's nothing. But I can honestly say that emotionally, I've changed. I'm stronger now. In the beginning, everything destroyed me. I cried constantly. I couldn't focus. I couldn't function. My emotions controlled my entire day. Now I handle things differently. I don't know why he does what he does, but I know what I do for myself and for my daughters. Today, I work. I provide for our home. I have my own car again. About a year after moving into this apartment, I saved every dollar I could and finally bought a car for us. Now I have transportation. I'm still in this apartment. Little by little, I'm furnishing it. Everything happens one step at a time because I'm doing it alone. My routine is simple. I work, I take the girls to school, I pick them up, I take care of the house, work and home, home and work. Sometimes, when it's not their weekend with their father, I go out, I go to church. That's my life now. And honestly, when I think back to the woman who arrived in this apartment with nothing but boxes, I never imagined I'd rebuild myself this quickly. Today, I have a steady job. I work Tuesday through Saturday from 9 to 6. I bought my own car. I'm planning to start college. I want to make memories with my daughters. I want to rebuild myself. I want to challenge myself. And more than anything, I want to be happy. That's all I want.
Please comment with kindness. There's a real person behind every story. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.